Isn't that amazing? They know exactly when to stop the song. It just works out, doesn't it? It's the Spirit of God. Well, I have to confess, we don't do formal confessions in this service. We have it as a part of the liturgy in the second. So here's my confession. I forgot the children's message. As they were leaving, I'm like, oh my gosh. So you can just tell them next week. Maybe I'll tell them what this means. So I'm sorry. They missed that part. So there's my confession. I think most of us today are familiar. It's a little bit old now. We all kind of heard it before, this idea or this concept of 6 degrees of separation between you and the world, right? The idea that all living things all over the world are 6 steps or fewer in connection to you. That's kind of a crazy thing. It's this sort of chain of a friend of a friend statements that can be made to connect us to people with a very maximum of 6 steps. So here's how the theory works out, if you're not up to speed with it. So through just 5 other people, you count, so you're number 6. Just through 5 other people, you're effectively connected to, get this, the Queen of England. And you go, oh, that's nuts, it's crazy. Or maybe you're connected, did you watch football last night? You might be connected to Tom Brady. I knew that would get somebody in here. That's not, actually, my notes said Tom Cruise, but that's not going to do it for me. So or you may be connected to a Mongolian sheep herder. There you go. Get excited about those sheep herders. But, you go, okay, this is crazy. This is nuts. We've heard this stuff before. There's actually science behind this whole 6 degrees of separation, this theory. If you just look at the numbers, and here's how it works out. The 6 degrees of separation idea is that, first of all, it assumes you know 44 people. If you don't know 44 people, you're excused from the rest of the worship, because I'm assume that you know at least 44. There's 40. Did you greet somebody today? Okay, there's 44 of you in here. You count. It assumes you know 44 people. So based on that, those 44 people also need to know 44 people. So you do this whole math. The math shows that in just 6 steps, you're connected to anyone. In fact, if you go by that theory, in just 6 steps, you are connected to over 7.26 billion people. Now, here's the funny thing. There aren't that many alive in the world right now. So you must be connected to some dead people, too. So I'm just moving right along. Does that really mean, if this stuff is true, and mathematically, I get it, but I'm not so sure about the deeper meaning of all this, but does it really mean that someone knows us, that we're really connected, that they know who we are? It's funny. Sometimes we think, oh, I've got some really close friends and they really know me, but do they? Do they just seem to know us really well? Maybe we have multiple experiences. We've been with them on trips. You really get to know somebody on a trip. Have you ever just kind of known somebody as an acquaintance and you go on a trip with them? You find out all kinds of stuff. And so that's for another sermon, but here we go. Do they really know you? That's the question in the gospel today. And I'm going to read this to you. And another mystery, I'll confess, my Bible has gone missing. So I have this Bible with little teeny tiny words. And even these won't help. So I'm going to read off the screen today, if we can get that up there. We're going to be reading out of the Gospel of John, 1st chapter. We're going to read verses 43 to 51. This is John starting out the gospel, and he's telling us how Jesus began his ministry. So here we go. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee, and he found Philip, and he said to him, "Follow me." Now, Philip was from Bethsaida. Bethsaida's on the north end of the Sea of Galilee, so lots of folks are up the little fishing village. I've actually been there. It's a neat little place. They've actually excavated the city of Bethsaida, and you can walk the very streets that Jesus walked. One of the few places in all of the Holy Land that you could actually put your foot in a place where Jesus walked down that main street. So Philip was from that place, Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael, and he says to Nathanael, "We've found him, about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph, from Nazareth." And we know this saying, Nazareth? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? It's a little podunky little town that nobody really cares about. So could anything come out of that place? Philip said to him, well, come and see. When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said of him, here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. No deceit. Nathanael asked him, where did you get to know me? He's asking Jesus, you know who I am? You know me? How did that happen? Jesus answered, I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you. Nathanael replied, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. May God bless the reading and the hearing of God's holy word. So if we read this, and I don't know if it's a 6 degrees of separation thing going on in biblical terms, somehow Jesus seems to know Nathanael, a stranger that I guess he'd never met. How did Jesus know him? It's not just our question, it's Nathanael's question. He wants to know. He wants to know. You know, it's sometimes when people are part of our life circle, it's easy to get to know us. But in this case, Nathanael's not part of Jesus' little circle. He's just starting his circle. He hasn't even begun. And Nathanael didn't grow up in Nazareth. You can hear the statement. He didn't think much of the place. So how does all this happen? The key verse I want to talk about today is verse 48. Jesus answers him and says, I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called to you. Some translations tack on again, I saw you. I saw you. I saw you. I love to, I don't know how it is for you guys, but I love to surprise people with information that I know about them. And I mean that in a good way, not a bad way. You know, the pastors get lots of information. But sometimes people will come to me in a setting, even like in church, even, today after church. Hey, I brought a friend of mine with me. They're from Michigan. You know, they're down visiting. They went to Disney World, and they'll tell me all this stuff. And then later, maybe moments later, maybe 30 minutes later, maybe over in Anderson Hall, they'll introduce me. And I'll say, oh, yes, I know you. You just came down from Michigan, and you're here, and you're going to Disney World. And they go, and so this is what I did. It's part of the job, you know. I just messed up my hair, too, but that's the way it goes. So it's, you sort of know stuff. That was going to be my children's sermon. You can pass that along, okay? Got it? Great. And they think, oh, how do you know that? Well, the context is this. People, little birdies whisper to me, and I hold on to that information. I can't remember a lot of things, but I usually remember that kind of stuff. And it's a really cool little parlor trick to play on people. And I think I do it for a couple of reasons. I think it makes people feel good, doesn't it? When you can say something about them that, hey, he kind of knows me already. Wow, that's cool. This guy knows some stuff about me, especially if I meet somebody for the first time. Really, it's kind of a cool little trick. So who did Jesus talk to ahead of time before he met Nathanael? Did the little birdies come whispering? How did he get to know Nathanael before they'd even been introduced? And, this same questions happened before. If we read all the gospel stories, lots of encounters with Jesus, with other people, where he seems to know things about him. Remember the story of the woman at the well, where he goes up and he seems to know all about her? And she's kind of, whoa, I can see you're a prophet. So it's kind of, he didn't have the hat on, but she can tell. He seems to know some stuff that's going on. He knew it. He conveyed it to her in no uncertain terms. In that case, some of what he revealed wasn't so flattering. So maybe he talked to a friend, right? Maybe the little birdies, he talked to a friend. Maybe he talked to a relative. Maybe in that case with the woman at the well, maybe she had a reputation that preceded her into this chance meeting, so Jesus had information. Maybe one of the folks that Jesus had been traveling with had shared stories about her. We don't know. But it seems Jesus knew her. Maybe it's what I call the Sherlockian deduction. Maybe it's just a process of just rational thought. She was at the well. She was at the well at a time no one else really was going to be there. So it's telling already that she goes when she's going to be alone. So maybe it's a logical process and Jesus figures it out. I don't know about that story. In the Nathanael story here, maybe Jesus did know Nathanael. in one sense. Maybe Nathanael was part of a process. Maybe Nathanael was part of a broader strategy, a plan. This is me just kind of trying to figure it out. Maybe it's a plan that had already accounted for him. Maybe Nathanael had been researched, watched. Maybe he'd been studied. Maybe he was known. Because I don't think this encounter was chance or random. I think it was God. You know, if you back up, we didn't read the very first verses in John's Gospel, but if you look at those very first verses in John's Gospel, there's a testimony of John the Baptist. And you put those two things together about how John starts the gospel in the very words of John the Baptist, and you can tell that there's this sense of this pre-existent word of God. And he has a name. His name's Jesus. So in one sense, the gospel's already telling us this guy from the Galilee is more than just another would-be Messiah. Did you know there were a lot of Messiahs from Galilee? Jesus wasn't the first one. As a matter of fact, there had been others that had started rebellions and they'd been put down. So here's just another prophet from Galilee. But this was different. Others say there may have been tells about Nathanael that offered Jesus certain insight about who he was. Because Jesus said, I saw you where? Under the tree. What does that mean? I saw you under the tree. Well, the symbolism of the tree kind of conveys, and especially he's sitting under the tree, it's a place of meditation, it's a place of prayer. So some would say, well, there's Nathanael, he's over there, and Jesus knew by the symbolism of the tree that he's praying. He's praying in a very traditional way. He's praying for the Messiah to come. He's praying for the burdens to be lifted off the people of Israel. And so it was a very clear tell. He's over there. It says he's a righteous guy. He's praying for the righteousness of God to break in. He wants it to happen. And Jesus saw that. And maybe you know somebody like that. Maybe you can just look at folks and say, you know, I sense this person's very spiritual. I sense the kind of the Spirit of God is working in them. Maybe they have this sense of holiness, and that doesn't happen to me very much. But it may happen to you, right? The sense of holiness in certain people, you can kind of sort it out. And maybe that's what was really going on here. It could be that Jesus knew Nathanael's thoughts for this coming Messiah. We sang that song, Even So Come. Terry and I didn't talk about that. That's a God thing right there. It matches perfectly with where we're going. It could be Jesus knew about Nathanael's heart, his dreams. Because some people would say Jesus is the dream seer and the heart knower. That's a wonderful way to think about this Messiah, this person we know as Jesus. So you go, okay, which one of those things is it? Maybe it's just Jesus being Jesus. But a lot of this is already told to us. It's shared in Scripture. And I want to go back to a passage. Sometimes we use this at memorial services. I think we used it a week ago. But it's Psalm 139. I want to read you one excerpt out of Psalm 139. And I want you to listen how God knows us. Because if Jesus is God in flesh, this means this is how Jesus knows us. Psalm says this: "It was you who created my inmost self." It's along the screen if you want to watch. "And put me together in my mother's womb. For all these mysteries, I thank you. For the wonder of myself, for the wonder of your works. You know me. You know me through and through. You watched my bones take shape when I was being formed in secret, knitted together in the limbo of the womb. You'd scrutinized my every actions. All were recorded in your book. My days listed and determined even before the first of them occurred." That's God. And that's Jesus. Before you were being born, before you were being formed in secret, Jesus knew you. I have a little video I want you to watch for a moment.
And you have been, and you will be. You have seen, and you will see. You know when I rise and when I fall, when I come or go. You see it all, and you hung the stars, and you move the sea. And still you know me, oh, oh, oh.
I think Jesus knew Nathanael because he was God. He already knew him. And it was more than that. I think Jesus knew exactly what would be needed. He knew he needed certain people to be around him, and he chose them. And the gospel follows that pattern if you look at it. It's Jesus finds someone, and he brings that person into his circle. And you see it reported in a different way, where Philip says that he's found, right, the one who Moses and the prophets wrote about. In truth, I believe Jesus found him and the others, and in turn, they became apostles who invited others to join in the same circle. So the truth today, and we'll be really acting this out in a real way at the second service when we bring together the new leaders that God has chosen in this place and set apart to be part of that circle of ministry. But the truth for us at this service today is that God's not too busy to know us individually. I think sometimes we see God as so distant, but really God is much closer than you think. I found one quote about this video, and I thought it summed up the point perfectly. To God, each and every single person on the face of the earth, since the beginning of the human race to the end of earth, is his single most prized possession. You. He cares about you individually more than anything else. He loves you more than any human could ever possibly love. And that's great news. And he doesn't care where we're from. He doesn't care what we've done, what situation that we're currently in. It doesn't keep him away from us. He loves us just as much as he did, as Psalm 139 says, before you were even born. A wonderful thought. There is nothing more beautiful in the whole universe than the love of God and the mercy of God available to all of us. So how does God pick? I love the line in the song, "You memorize me." God has memorized us, and still he knows, and he chooses us. And it's really up to us. We can say yes to stepping closer into that circle, or we can say no. Each of us is invited to make that move of Nathanael. In spite of reservations, maybe in spite of some doubts, maybe even skepticism, because Jesus is the dream seer and the heart knower. Amen.